everyone. It's a bit blustery up here. I want to talk to you today about customer satisfaction surveys. If you've worked with me in the past, you know that I'm a huge advocate of surveys, but I do also think it needs to be done properly, otherwise there's not really much point. I've just been to get some food shopping this morning, the local supermarket, big chain as well, and they've started to gather some sentiment from their customers. So if you go to the self-service till, at the very end they've had one of those smiley terminals integrated into the till system. So when you finish paying, it pops up at the end, and then you pick the face that represents how you feel about the experience. Obviously sad face, not so sad face, okay face, happy face, extremely happy face. Now that's great, you know, obviously they've had a requirement to gain some sentiment, I assume, from their board of directors. And then they've chosen this option. Now, if at the end of the day, when they get all the results, 1,000 people have selected a sad face, what exactly are they getting from that? All right, they know 1,000 people were unhappy with the service or the till, or it could have been anything that they were unhappy about. So how do you actually know? And if you don't know, how are you going to make any improvements? They do exactly the same thing in the airports now. They have the little smiley terminals normally when you go to the gate, and then you do the same, you pick which face represents how you're feeling. But you could have been anywhere in the airport. You could have been to a restaurant, you could have been to a bar, you could have used the facilities, you could have been in a store. You might pick unhappy, but how do they know what it is you're unhappy about? So yeah, I think it's great that you're doing surveys, but I'm not quite sure the thought process that's gone into it as to why you've chosen that option. A lot of places do it with Net Promoter Score, so they even do it at doctor surgeries now, or if you've bought a car or whatever that is, you might get an email or a text message asking you either how satisfied you were. It's normally out of 0 to 5, or they'll ask you the Net Promoter Score, which is, would you recommend that business to a friend or a colleague? The scoring 0 out of 10, there's a calculation behind it as how you work out the score itself. Now, I worked with Net Promoter Score for years. I absolutely love it. But you've got to then ask a follow-up question. So if somebody clicks 0, you want to know why they've clicked 0, and it's that data that is what's important, the verbatim. Yes, not every customer's going to leave some comments, but the majority do, whether they're good or bad. And then you need a team internally who will sit and read those comments. They'll look at each one, and they'll pull together the trends, and then based on the trends is whether you need to make improvements or not. But just getting a score of 1,000 people are unhappy, 500 people are okay, and 2,000 people are really happy, well, I don't understand what changes you'd make within your business based on that data. Now, some people might say, well, we make some assumptions, maybe there's an issue with the till. So today, 3 of those self-service tills are all closed off. Therefore, a lot of people might have selected they were unhappy because it had a queue. So, okay, you could make some sort of assumption, but you can't do that all the time, and that's blatantly obvious what's happened there today. Now, I worked with an airline for a while, and I had a meeting with the customer experience manager. That's not why I was there. I was there to do something different, but was just interested to see, the types of things they did, how they surveyed. And she sent me a presentation prior to our meeting, and there was lots of data. They'd used an external company that emailed, 1,000 people about the overall service. So how to book a flight, what the support is if they needed to change anything, what if they needed to make a complaint, etc. Now, in that data, there was something like 85% of customers are find it easy to book their flight via email. So I'd already wrote down a load of questions and I'd only been there a few weeks. So I asked her, you've got in the survey 85% of customers find the process of booking a flight really easy via email, but you can't book a flight via email. So how did you get that data? And she said, well, we make some assumptions. Well, that's great, but that assumption was not even true. You can't even make an assumption because a customer cannot physically book a flight with an email. They have to either ring the call centre or download the app. So the assumption they made was just, well, it's just pointless. I just don't understand how much money is being spent on these surveys, how many assumptions are being made. So, how many assumptions are being made on just things that aren't even factually correct. And then, these businesses are then making decisions based on this information. I just think it's a lot of money being spent out there by businesses. It's just a waste of time. Just going back to Net Promoter Score as well, I spoke to a company recently and they wanted me to do some surveys, which I have done for them. They wanted to ask Net Promoter Score, but they wanted me to position the scoring differently. So as I've just said, Net Promoter Score is, would you recommend us to friends or colleagues? Based on a score of 0 to 10, 0 being extremely unlikely, 10 being extremely likely. Now this is normally positioned as the question and then 0 to 10 in a line, and then the customer obviously goes along and picks what they want. They wanted me to do a drop down instead, so a drop down box. This is all on email, by the way. Online survey. So a drop down box starting with 10. Because they wanted to, their hope was that if the drop down was from 10 to 0, then the customer is more likely not to scroll right to the bottom, therefore they'll pick the higher numbers. So what is the point? So no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to position the question as the question should be positioned, because I don't believe you should manipulate your customers to pick a better score, because what's the point? You're wasting their time, you're wasting your own time and money to try and get a better score instead of just finding out exactly what it is they're not happy about and doing something about it. Therefore your business will then improve and you'll make more money. I mean, it literally is as simple as that. If you're going to manipulate your customer into giving you a better score, then you're never going to achieve anything. Good example, and I'm not saying this is why this company went bust, but another airline, the smallish airline, used to manipulate their Net Promoter Score. I've seen it before because I've flew with them a few times, and the way they positioned the answering was to in fact try to gain a higher number. Now that company no longer exists, so if they're doing that with a simple customer satisfaction service, which would have been costing them quite a lot of money, I would imagine, then what else were they doing? But what they certainly weren't doing was actually focusing on the problems and putting them right. So if you want some information on Net Promoter Score or customer satisfaction surveys, or if you just want somebody to review your process, then I'm happy to look at that. So you can have a little look at my website and drop me an email. Thanks.